It started with those 5 classic words. I need a break, Mason. She said them with a softness that felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing in front of a mirror, finding just the right balance between pity and resolve. Brielle stood at the kitchen counter, swirling her wine glass, eyes glistening with a guilt that might have been real, or maybe it was just for show. I watched her, her posture too straight, like she was bracing for a fight. But there was no fight left in me. I'd been running on fumes for months, ever since she started coming home later, her perfume different, her phone buzzing at midnight with muted laughter. I knew something was off, but I'd hoped, God, I'd hoped, it was just work stress, or maybe her anxiety flaring up again. But then she said it. I need a break, Mason. The words hit me harder than any slap. I felt them in my bones. I could almost hear the final click of a door locking behind me. I tried to hold her gaze, but she turned away too quickly, focusing on the swirl of her wine as if it could tell her something she didn't already know. I've lost myself, she continued. Her voice cracked like a porcelain cup splitting under pressure. No contact, for clarity. That's what she called it. Clarity. Like our marriage was some foggy mirror she needed to wipe down, alone. I didn't yell, didn't beg, even though part of me wanted to. Wanted to grab her arms and shake her out of whatever trance she'd slipped into. But I didn't. Because the woman I married was asking for space, and if space was what she needed, who was I to deny her that? She packed a single duffel bag, just enough clothes for a week, maybe 2, and said she'd stay with her sister, Nadine. I watched her move around the apartment, carefully selecting what to take, what to leave behind. Her favorite cardigan, the worn-out yoga pants she always wore on Sundays. A half-empty bottle of rose-scented lotion. It felt like she was curating a version of herself to take on her journey, like I was no longer part of the exhibit. I stood by the doorway, silent, as she zipped up the bag and looped the handles over her shoulder. She didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push for it. She paused at the door, one hand on the knob, and let out a sigh that sounded like a rehearsal for a different life. I'll call you when I'm ready, she said, her voice small. I nodded. That was it. No kiss. No promise. Just a whisper of an apology and a final click as the door closed behind her. I didn't chase her. I didn't call out. I just stood there, staring at the door like it might open again, and she'd come back, realizing this was all a mistake. But the silence that followed was a verdict. I let her walk out. I told myself it was what she wanted, what she needed. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling like I just watched the end of something I tried so hard to build. Something that used to make sense, but now felt like a story written in a language I no longer understood. The kitchen smelled like her perfume, a lingering reminder that she'd been here, that she'd once belonged to this space. I looked at the half-empty wine glass on the counter, the smudge of her lipstick on the rim. My chest ached in a way I couldn't quite describe, like a cavity that had been hollowed out and left to echo with every small sound. The clock ticked, relentless, counting down the seconds since she'd left. I wanted to call her, to ask her what she meant by clarity, to beg her to stay. But I didn't, because I wasn't that man anymore. I'd given her space, and I'd given her silence. I wandered into the living room, staring at the couch where we'd sat together so many nights, tangled up in blankets and each other's stories. Now it felt like a museum piece, an artifact of a life that no longer belonged to me. I sank into the cushions and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. I didn't know then that I was watching the end begin, that every small choice, every quiet second, was leading me to a moment I couldn't yet see. The wine glass in the kitchen gleamed under the overhead light. I thought about washing it, but I left it there, like a reminder, like a question. The air felt different, stiller. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to carry a different tone. A note of finality that rattled my bones. I pressed my palms together, the skin dry and unfamiliar. My thoughts wandered to Nadine's place, how Brielle would be there, telling stories about our marriage that would paint me as the villain or the victim, depending on the audience. I wondered if she'd mention the nights I'd stayed up worrying about her, or the days I'd worked overtime just to give her everything she'd ever asked for. I closed my eyes and let the darkness come. In that moment, I decided I wouldn't call. I wouldn't text. I wouldn't chase her down the path she'd chosen. If she needed space, I'd give it to her. If she needed silence, I'd let the silence fill the air between us like a wall. And in that silence, I'd find my own answers, my own clarity. Because if she could walk out so easily, maybe I needed to know who I was without her. Maybe I'd been holding on too tight to a version of us that no longer existed. So I sat there, breathing in the quiet, letting the weight of her absence sink in. And in that stillness, I realized that sometimes the beginning of the end feels just like any other Tuesday night, just like any other sigh at the door, just like any other whispered, "I just need space." 10 days later, I was scrolling through my phone, mindlessly swiping past the cluttered noise of notifications and updates, trying not to miss her too much. The apartment was too quiet, filled with that stale sort of silence that settles in when you vacuumed and reorganized just to fill the time. I'd blocked her on most social media accounts after she left, some combination of self-preservation and quiet anger, but I hadn't blocked her mom, Loretta. I guess some part of me wanted to hold on to a lifeline, a way of knowing what was happening without having to ask. A window into the mess. It was late. Somewhere between the hour when the world sleeps and the hour when the insomniacs stir. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, the glow of the screen painting my face in pale blue light, when I saw it. Loretta's post. Family reset retreat. Feeling grateful. A carousel of sunny photos lined up beneath the caption, a parade of beach chairs and brightly colored cocktails, perfectly manicured toes in the sand. And there she was, Brielle, beaming in every single one of them. She looked radiant, hair sunlit and skin glowing, the kind of glow you can't fake with a filter. 100-watt smile in every frame. But it wasn't the smile that punched me in the gut. It was him, Jared. The same Jared she'd always told me was a harmless high school fling. The he never meant anything guy. The we barely talk guy. And there he was in photo after photo, tanned, shirtless, his arms slung casually around her waist in a way that said he'd done it 1,000 times. Like he'd never stopped. Like I'd never even existed. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening like a fist. Each photo felt like a new slap. There was the one where she wore that orange bikini she'd ordered off some influencer's page. She'd modeled it for me in our bathroom mirror, asking if it made her look too young. There she was, smiling wide, arms around Jared's neck, his hands planted firmly on her hips. Like she was proud to be his. Like she'd chosen him long before she chose me. My thumb hovered over the screen, stuck between rage and disbelief. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I just stared. The captions didn't help. Family bonding. Grateful for these moments. Grateful for him? I scrolled back, hoping, praying that maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe Jared was there with his own family and just happened to be in the frame. But every photo told the same story. Her, leaning in, eyes bright, smile wide. Like this was the life she'd been waiting for. Like every promise she'd made to me was just an afterthought. And in the background, Loretta smiling like the queen she always wanted to be, holding court over her perfect family vacation, her perfect daughter, her perfect new son-in-law in waiting. It was too much. Too perfect. The rage that simmered under my skin felt foreign, raw, and electric. It felt like betrayal with a capital B. Like I'd been a fool to think she needed space to figure herself out. No, she needed time to figure it out with Jared's hands on her hips. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to call her, to demand answers, to scream through the phone that she'd lied to me. But I knew better. Knew that if she could smile like that in those photos, then she'd made her choice. And I'd be damned if I'd let her see me crack. I let the phone drop into my lap, the screen still glowing with her smile. The room felt too small, too empty. I could still smell her perfume on the pillows, the faint echo of her laughter in the walls. But it was all an illusion, a memory that no longer belonged to me. She'd chosen him, or maybe she'd always wanted him, and I'd just been the placeholder, the bridge she needed to get from one heartbreak to another. The thought made me feel sick. I stood and walked to the kitchen, the overhead light too bright, the white tiles too clean. I gripped the counter and took a breath, letting the anger cool just enough to think straight. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep sitting here, scrolling through photos that would only make the wound deeper. I opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and stared at it like it might offer some comfort. But it didn't. Nothing would. Because I was alone. And I was the one who let her go. I remembered the way she'd said it. Like she was doing me a favor. I need a break, Mason. Like I was the reason she couldn't breathe. Like I'd smothered her dreams and ambitions and she just needed space to spread her wings. But in those photos, she didn't look like she was searching for herself. She looked like she'd found exactly what she wanted. And it wasn't me. I walked back to the living room, phone still in hand. I clicked on Loretta's post again, forcing myself to look at every photo, every detail. The palm trees swaying in the background, the turquoise water glistening, the cocktails sweating in the heat. It looked like paradise, a place where heartbreak couldn't reach. I wondered if she'd thought of me at all, if, even for a second, she'd felt the ache of the space she'd left behind. Probably not. Not with Jared there to fill in the blanks. I sank into the couch, feeling the weight of my own decisions. I could call her. I could send a text demanding answers, but what would that prove? That I was weak enough to beg for an explanation she'd never give? That I was still tethered to a woman who'd chosen to let another man's hands rest on her hips while she laughed at the waves? No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I wouldn't give her the power to decide how I felt about myself. So I sat there in the dark, phone screen fading to black, and made a promise to myself. I'd let her have her vacation. Let her have Jared. Let her have the bright sun and the perfect smiles and the fake captions. Because I didn't need them. I didn't need her. I needed the truth. And the truth was simple. She'd shown me exactly who she was. And now it was up to me to decide what to do with that. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. The city hummed with late-night traffic and neon signs. People living their lives, laughing, crying, moving on. And I realized I could too. I wasn't trapped in her story anymore. I was free to write my own. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. It wouldn't include her. Not on my terms. Not in my home. And definitely not in my heart. I turned back toward the living room, the phone still in my hand. I opened the app and blocked her mom. One less window into a life that didn't include me. One less reminder of what I'd lost. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and felt the first real sense of peace I'd felt in days. She was gone, and maybe that was the best gift she'd ever given me. I didn't scream, didn't call, didn't even leave a voice note. Instead, I did what I'd always done when the world felt too big, too sharp. I retreated. I spent the weekend in the spare room, our guest room, the one she'd always said was too empty, but I'd always found a strange comfort in its starkness. A simple bed, a nightstand, a small lamp, and a blank wall. A place to think without the clutter of memories. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the screenshots I'd taken of Loretta's post. The ones with Brielle's smile and Jared's arms like iron bars around her waist. Each image was like a nail in the coffin of the life I'd thought I'd been building. But I didn't let the grief swallow me. I let it harden me. When the sun rose on Saturday, I went to work. Every step was deliberate. I started in the closet, her side, the side I'd carefully given her when we first moved in, the side that smelled like lavender and warm vanilla and a hint of the sandalwood cologne I used to wear just because she liked it. I opened the sliding door and stared at the rows of clothes, some new, some worn, some never even tried on. A life in fabric. I reached for the first item, a floral dress she'd worn to my promotion dinner, and folded it neatly, placing it into a sturdy box I'd labeled in black marker. Box 1, Dresses and Skirts. It felt clinical, safe, like a process with a beginning and an end, like I could control something again. I worked through her wardrobe methodically, folding each piece with the same precision I'd once reserved for arranging her flowers on Sunday mornings. Every blouse, every sweater, every pair of yoga pants. Each went into its own box, labeled and numbered. Box 2, Box 3, Box 4. I made an inventory list for each one, snapped photos of the contents, and attached them to the top of the boxes with clear packing tape. No confusion, no mistakes, nothing she could accuse me of misplacing. I moved to the bathroom next, her half-empty bottles of shampoo and conditioner, the bath salts she'd always bought from that overpriced spa, her makeup bag with the broken zipper. Box 5, Bathroom Essentials. The living room was harder. Her paintbrushes, lined up like soldiers on the bookshelf. The canvas she'd been working on, a swirl of greens and golds that might have been a landscape or maybe just an emotional exorcism, sat on the coffee table. I hesitated. Art had always been her escape, her therapy. I'd respected that. But now, even her therapy felt like a lie. I wrapped the canvas carefully in bubble wrap, 3 layers, and placed it in box 6, Art Supplies. Each brush got its own sleeve of paper, its own label. I wasn't taking chances. The kitchen was next. Her mismatched mugs, some chipped, some with lipstick stains, went into box 7, Kitchen Items. I could still see her sipping coffee on sleepy mornings, legs tucked under her on the bar stool, telling me about her dreams. Now I just saw betrayal. I took each item, wrapped it, photographed it, labeled it. No arguments. No denials. Every mug accounted for. Every glass protected. By the time I reached the bedroom again, the sun was slipping toward the horizon, and the air smelled like dust and cardboard. I sat on the bed, our bed, though it felt foreign now, and stared at the last few items. Her grandmother's earrings, small and delicate, the ones she'd worn on our wedding day. The necklace I'd given her on our first anniversary, the one she'd worn the night we danced under fairy lights in our tiny backyard. I wrapped them in bubble wrap, placed them in a velvet pouch, and marked them. Box 8, jewelry and keepsakes. It all felt so final. 12 boxes. 12 neat little coffins for every piece of her life that had bled into mine. I stacked them by the door, each one marked with an inventory sheet and a fragile sticker. I took photos of every box, top, sides, bottom, and saved them to a folder titled Brielle's Property. I didn't want a single accusation of theft. No loopholes for her to exploit later. Every detail accounted for. Then I went online, filled out the forms, and scheduled a courier to pick them up on Monday morning. Address: Loretta and Carlton's home. I wondered if they'd sign for them together, grinning at each other like conspirators. I wondered if Jared would be there, carrying her boxes inside like he was already moving her into a new life. I imagined Loretta's face, tight-lipped and dignified, watching me get erased from her daughter's story, one box at a time. The thought didn't sting as much as I expected. I think I'd run out of pain. When I was done, I vacuumed the rug. It felt like a reset, like wiping away the dust of a betrayal that had grown too heavy to bear. The lines in the carpet made perfect stripes under the lamplight, a small piece of order in a life that had gone so chaotically wrong. I took one last look at the boxes, neat, labeled, final, and felt something shift in my chest, a sense of peace I hadn't expected, because this was closure. This was the end. There'd be no messy fights about what belonged to whom. No teary-eyed phone calls begging me to leave things at her sister's. Everything was handled, professionally, properly. I went to my phone and updated my relationship status to single. It felt like a small victory, like a step forward. I blocked her. I blocked Loretta. I blocked Jared. It was a digital quarantine, a way to keep the infection of their betrayal from spreading any further into my life. The notifications would stop. The photos would vanish. The smiling faces and bright captions would disappear from my feed. I'd made sure of it. When I finished, I stood in the center of the apartment, our apartment, and took a deep breath. The space felt different now, lighter, like a storm had passed and left behind a clearer sky. I could see the future again, even if it was blurry and uncertain. But at least it was mine now. No one else's fingerprints on it. Just me and the choices I'd made to protect myself. I turned off the lights and let the darkness settle around me. The boxes stood like silent sentinels, waiting for the morning. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even sigh. I just let the quiet fill the room, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her to come back. I wasn't waiting for anything, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me, and I'd already decided. No contact, no drama, no regrets. Just a clean break, a new beginning, and maybe, just maybe, the start of something stronger than what we'd had. Because sometimes, the best way to heal is to pack it all up and ship it away. 3 weeks of silence settled like a weighted blanket on my chest, pressing down every time I walked into the apartment and didn't hear her voice. The first few days, I half expected her to call, to text, to say she'd changed her mind. But nothing came. The quiet stretched into days, and then into nights where the ticking of the clock on the kitchen wall sounded louder than my own breathing. I filled the time with long hours at the gym, overtime at work, meal preps I never used to do alone. I told myself I was finding peace in the quiet. And maybe I was. Maybe that was the only way to heal. Then my phone buzzed, interrupting my dinner of reheated chicken and cold rice. An unknown number lit up the screen. For a second, my chest tightened. It couldn't be her. She'd made her choice. But curiosity won. I picked up. Hello. My voice was calm, steady, like I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. There was a pause, a soft intake of breath on the other end. Then her voice, soft as rain. Mason, it's me. Even after everything, hearing her voice felt like a blade. I closed my eyes, letting it slide between my ribs. I tried to picture her face, those honey brown eyes that used to shine whenever I walked through the door, the way her lips curled when she was about to laugh. But all I could see was her smile in Jared's arms, bright and easy, like the pain she'd left me with didn't exist. "Hi, Brielle," I said, my tone polite but cold, like I was talking to a distant acquaintance, not the woman I'd promised forever to. She must have felt the chill. She hesitated. I've been thinking," she started, the words slow and careful, like stepping onto thin ice. "About us. About everything. I think I'm ready to talk. Really talk. I've been working through things, and I want to try. With us." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I wondered if she was crying. The old me would have leapt to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, that we'd figure it out together. But that man was gone. He'd packed up her life in 12 boxes and sent it to her mother's house. He'd vacuumed the rug and blocked her number. He decided that peace meant silence. I didn't answer right away. I let the pause stretch until it was uncomfortable. I wanted her to feel it, to know that this wasn't her story to write anymore. Finally, I took a breath and said it. "There is no us, Brielle." The words came out level, sharp. No tremble, no apology, just the truth. She sucked in a breath, and I imagined her eyes widening in that way they always did when she didn't get what she wanted. "Mason," she whispered, "please. I've been working on myself. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I needed time. I needed to figure out who I was without you." Her voice broke again. "I just want to try. Just one more chance." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone like it was the last lifeline between me and the past. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it break me. I'd given her all the chances she'd asked for. I'd given her space. I'd given her time. I'd given her everything, even when it hurt. But I wasn't going to give her more than I had left. "Brielle," I said, my voice steady. "You had your chance. You made your choice. I'm not a backup plan." Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that vibrates with regret. I could almost see her, standing somewhere she thought was safe, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide with the realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't coming back. "Mason," she tried again, her voice smaller now. "Please don't do this. We were good together. I just got confused." I almost laughed, but it came out as a dry exhale. "Confused," I repeated, rolling the word around in my mouth like it was something I'd never heard before. "Is that what they call it when you're on a beach with your ex-boyfriend's hands on your hips?" The words hung in the air like smoke. She didn't answer, couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth, and there was no way to spin it. "Look," I continued, my voice like cold steel. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to beg. I'm not even going to blame you anymore. But there's nothing left for us to fix. You walked out. You asked for space. And I gave it to you." I paused, letting that sink in. Turns out, that space was enough for me to figure out who I was without you. A muffled sob came through the line, and for a brief second, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered the screenshots. The laughter. The way she looked at him like he was the answer to a question I hadn't even known she was asking. And I hardened again. "Goodbye, Brielle," I said. Then I hung up. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was freeing. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, its screen black and lifeless. I ran a hand through my hair and exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'd done it. I'd said the words that had been building inside me for weeks, the words that marked the true end. And it felt like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck too long. Painful, but necessary. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The lights glowed like stars against the darkness, each one a reminder that life went on. That somewhere, someone was starting fresh. Maybe that someone could be me. I'd spent so long defining myself by her, by us, that I'd forgotten there was a me in the middle of it all. A man who'd given everything and asked for so little. A man who'd believed in loyalty and trust and promises made under moonlit skies. And now? Now I was a man who knew his worth, who knew that sometimes loving someone meant letting them go, letting them figure themselves out, far away from the pieces of you they'd already broken. I turned away from the window, the city's glow still warm on my skin, and felt something new settle in my chest. Something strong. Something like peace. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to know. I was enough, just as I was. And that was a truth she could never take from me again. She tried to pretend confusion, the way she always did when she got caught. I could almost hear the rehearsed innocence in her voice, the way her tone shifted as if I were being unfair. Mason, I don't understand. The break wasn't a breakup, she said, her voice strained through the speaker. I imagined her twisting a lock of hair around her finger, biting her lip like she used to do when she was waiting for me to say something comforting. But I wasn't that man anymore. Her performance didn't move me. She paused, probably waiting for me to jump in with forgiveness, with reassurance, with a promise that I'd wait while she figured herself out. But silence stretched between us like a taut rope. Jared, I said flatly. Your mom's photos. His hands on your hips. That didn't look like confusion, Brielle. That looked like a choice. I could hear her swallow. That small sound gave me a grim satisfaction. Jared was just there, she said quickly, as though proximity justified betrayal. He's been going through stuff too, and I didn't plan it. My mom was clueless about how social media works. She just wanted a family album. That's all. Her voice wavered, but I could almost picture her face, eyes wide, trying to sell the lie. She'd always been good at that. Too good. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. You didn't plan it, I echoed. But you sure as hell posed for it. I felt my voice tighten with every word, each syllable a hook pulling up memories I didn't want to relive. Her laughter, her smell, the way she'd leaned into me and said I was the only man she'd ever really loved. Now those memories felt like stories from a book I'd never wanted to read. She sniffled. Mason, please. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was just a break. Time for me to think. You were supposed to give me space. Not judge me like this. Her tone shifted again, that edge of defensiveness creeping in. I recognized it, the way she'd always turned the blame back on me, the way she'd made me question my own instincts. Not this time. Space, I repeated. That's what you called it. Space. And what did you do with that space? You filled it with him. That's not confusion, Brielle. That's betrayal. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. Cars drifted past, like lazy fireflies. Somewhere down there, people were living lives that hadn't been shattered by lies. She started to panic. I could hear it. Mason, my sketchbooks, my grandmother's earrings. Where are they? Please, those are important to me. Her words came in a rush, like a dam breaking. Please tell me you didn't just throw everything away. I imagined her rummaging through her sister's spare room, finding nothing of hers, realizing I'd stripped her from my space like peeling off old wallpaper. They're in box 8, I said calmly. Bubble-wrapped. Labeled. Shipped to your parents' place. I made an inventory list. Everything's accounted for. You're welcome. Her breath hitched, and I almost felt a pang of pity. But that passed as quickly as it came. Because this was the woman who'd lied to my face and thought I'd just let it slide. God, Mason, why are you being so vindictive? She spat, the anger finally breaking through the cracks in her voice. I didn't do anything that bad. I just needed time. I felt my jaw tighten. Vindictive. That's what she called it. As if what I'd done was out of spite, and not necessity. Vindictive. I repeated, my tone even controlled. No, Brielle. I'm being thorough. So there's no confusion. So there's no, maybe it got lost, or, I forgot. I made sure you got every last piece of the life you left behind. Every last mug. Every last hairpin. Every last hope I had in us. My voice trembled at the edge of that last word, but I steadied it. She let out a soft sob, like she was shocked by my coldness. I can't believe you're being like this, she whispered, her voice small. We were supposed to be partners. You said you'd always support me, even when things got hard. I clenched my teeth. Partners. That was a word she'd used so often, but it had lost its meaning. Partners don't abandon each other at the first sign of difficulty. Partners don't find comfort in old flames when things get complicated. We were partners, I agreed, until you stopped being one. I let the silence stretch again, giving her time to absorb it. You chose your path. You chose your support system. You chose Jared. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was sharp enough to do the cutting. She sniffled again, and I could almost picture the tears. I just wanted to feel alive again, she said softly. Everything got so heavy between us. Work, bills, the pressure. I needed to remember who I was before it all. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you. I sighed, a deep, tired exhale. But you did, I said. And the thing is, I'm done carrying the weight of your confusion. You wanted to figure yourself out? That's fine. But don't ask me to clean up the mess after. I ran a hand through my hair, the tension easing from my shoulders as the words fell into place. Your things are at your parents'. Your art. Your memories. Everything you left behind. I made sure you got it all. Because that's who I am. That's the man you left. A man who finishes what he starts. She was crying now, the sound muffled and ragged. Mason, please, she whimpered. But I was done with please. I was done with maybe. I was done with all the half-finished promises and half-felt apologies. Goodbye, Brielle, I said. My voice was calm, but inside, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind in my hair, ready to let go of the last thing that tethered me to her. I ended the call before she could respond. I leaned against the window frame, letting the cool glass steady me. Outside, the night was alive with the sounds of cars, laughter, and the distant echo of a world that didn't care about my heartbreak. I breathed deeply, feeling the air fill my lungs with something close to relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd done something for myself, like I'd drawn a line in the sand and refused to let her step over it again. I glanced around the apartment, clean, quiet, my own. No more wondering if she'd come back. No more waiting for apologies. Just me. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what closure really looked like. A night alone, with your own voice telling you that you did the right thing. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle in, feeling more peace in that emptiness than I'd ever felt in her arms. Because sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop being the safety net for someone else's free fall. And in that darkness, I found my own light. I thought it was over. I thought my boxes and my silence had drawn a line in the sand she'd never cross again. But betrayal has a way of crawling back in, like mold in the corners you thought you'd cleaned. It was late, nearly midnight, when I pulled into the parking lot, exhausted from a shift that felt like it would never end. I'd been working extra hours, pouring myself into projects, anything to fill the empty spaces she'd left behind. The apartment had started to feel like mine again, a sanctuary. But the moment I swung my car door shut, I knew something was wrong. They were there, on my steps, framed by the dull yellow glow of the porch light. Brielle, red-eyed, clutching the edges of her sweater like a lifeline. And beside her, arms folded and jaw set like a courtroom judge, stood Loretta. Always so composed, always so certain of her own righteousness. I paused, keys in hand, staring at them like I'd stumbled onto the wrong movie set. We need to talk properly, Loretta said before I even reached the bottom step. Face to face. Her voice carried the same commanding tone that had once made me think she cared about me, back when I was the golden boy who'd married her daughter, the one she bragged about at brunch. Now it just sounded like an accusation. Brielle's eyes were wet and pleading. Mason, please, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. We never really talked about what happened. Not really. I need to explain. I let her words hang in the air, their weight settling like dust on an old book I'd stopped reading a long time ago. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I stood my ground. You had your chance, I said, each word measured. You had 3 weeks to reach out, to say something that didn't come with excuses or deflections. My voice was calm, but my hands were tied on my keys, as if I might need them to anchor myself. Loretta stepped forward like she was preparing a closing argument. Mason, this is your marriage we're talking about, she said, her eyes sharp. You don't just throw that away because of one mistake. She made a poor decision. She knows that now. You should have given her time. You should have given her grace. Grace. The word stung like salt in a wound. Grace was what I'd given her every time she'd stayed late at the office and came home with excuses. Grace was what I'd given her when she said she needed space, but didn't mention that space came with Jared's arms around her waist. Grace was the reason I'd packed her life into neat boxes instead of dumping it on the curb. Brielle wiped at her tears, her mascara smudging under her eyes. Jared was a mistake, she said, voice trembling. I swear, Mason, it didn't mean anything. I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. I needed to feel something, and he was just there. Her words were frantic, desperate, like a drowning woman reaching for anything that would keep her afloat. I met her gaze without flinching. Mistakes, I said. Mistakes are forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. Mistakes don't usually require swimsuits and matching cocktails. My tone was ice cold, but I didn't feel cold inside. I felt alive, Like every piece of myself she'd chipped away at was finally growing back. Brielle flinched, and Loretta's face darkened. "That's not fair," she snapped. "You know social media makes things look worse than they are. You should have waited for her to explain before you packed her things and shut her out." Her voice dripped with authority, the kind that expects obedience. I let out a breath, steady and controlled. "Loretta, I didn't ask her to lie. I didn't ask her to pose for pictures with her ex. I didn't ask her to put me on hold while she figured herself out. But I did make sure she had every single one of her things wrapped, labeled, and delivered. Because that's the kind of man I am." Brielle's lower lip quivered. "Mason, I love you," she whispered. I messed up. I need you to forgive me. We can fix this. I know we can." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for the softness she'd always found in me. But there was no softness left for her. I shook my head slowly. "Brielle," I said, my voice a quiet finality. "Love doesn't look like betrayal. It doesn't look like secrets and silent retreats. Love is trust. And you broke that." I took a step closer, but not to hold her. Just enough to let her see that I wasn't afraid of her tears anymore. "I gave you space. I gave you respect. I gave you every chance. But I'm done giving." She started to cry, shoulders shaking. Loretta reached out to steady her, but her eyes never left me, calculating, sharp. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "You'll see what happens when you throw away a marriage like it's nothing." She tightened her grip on Brielle's arm and pulled her a step back. I let the words hang in the night air, but they didn't pierce me. "Not anymore." "Maybe I will," I said quietly. "But at least I'll know I didn't let myself be a doormat." I turned and unlocked the door, the key sliding into the lock with a satisfying click. Before I pushed it open, I looked back at them one last time. "Good night," I said. And then I stepped inside and closed the door, leaving them on the steps with their regrets and excuses. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the distant city sounds. I leaned against the door, breathing in the silence like oxygen. I'd braced myself for the pain of this confrontation, but instead, I felt lighter, like I'd finally shut the last window she'd left open. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let it cool my throat. Outside, their voices faded as they left, the click of their heels on the concrete a slow retreat. I set the glass down and exhaled. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need her apologies. I'd given my all, and she'd spent it. Now it was my turn to spend time on me, my peace, my healing, my own life. As I turned off the lights and headed for the bedroom, I realized that sometimes closure doesn't come with a bow or a neat explanation. Sometimes it comes with a locked door and the knowledge that you were strong enough to close it yourself. And that was enough for me. "You changed the locks?" Her voice cracked through the speaker like thunder on a dry day. I could practically see her face, eyes wide, lips trembling, hands on hips like she'd just been wronged. I stayed quiet for a second, letting the question settle, as though it deserved a reply beyond the obvious. Of course I changed the locks. What did she expect? That I'd leave the door wide open for her to walk back in, arms full of excuses and cheap apologies? "Yes," I said finally, my tone even. I was proud of how steady it came out, unshaken by the tremor in her voice. "I changed the locks. It's my apartment now. My space. I'm done leaving it open for someone who doesn't live here anymore." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. It was her tell, the sound she always made when she was about to launch into an argument. I braced myself, leaning against the kitchen counter, the cold marble pressing into my palms like an anchor. "You threw away my planter too, didn't you?" she demanded. "The one with the succulents from our anniversary trip? How could you just—" I cut her off. "Box 3, I said, my voice calm but firm. "Labeled, padded, double-wrapped. Sent to your parents' place along with everything else." I let the silence stretch, picturing her face in that moment. The indignation deflating like a popped balloon. Loretta's voice cut in next, sharp, brittle, as if she'd been waiting for her cue. "Mason, you humiliated my daughter," she snapped. "She's been through enough without you treating her like a criminal. You boxed up her life and shipped it away like garbage. How dare you?" I could almost see her, standing in her designer flats and holding a cup of herbal tea like a gavel. She'd always carried herself like a judge, all stern authority and righteous anger. But not tonight. Tonight, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "I didn't humiliate her," I said, my voice steady as stone. "I respected her decision to leave. I respected her space. I respected her enough to pack her things with care. Everything she left behind, every paintbrush, every mug, every goddamn memory, I treated it like it mattered. Because it did. To me, it did. And now it's hers again. I didn't throw away a single thing. I let the weight of my words hang there, filling the space where her judgment tried to settle. Brielle tried to jump in then, her voice shaky. Mason, I didn't mean for things to get so complicated, she pleaded. I just needed time to breathe, to figure myself out. You always rushed me. You never gave me the space to. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. You left, Brielle. You chose space, and I gave it to you. But you didn't need space. You needed an alibi, and I'm done giving you that. She went silent. The only sound on the line was her shaky breath, as if she was trying to figure out which line might still work on me. Loretta, though, wasn't done. She's your wife, she said, her voice lowering into that scolding tone that always made me grit my teeth. You took vows. You promised to stand by her. Through everything. You can't just walk away because things got difficult. I felt my jaw tighten, the memory of that wedding day pressing against my skull like a bad dream. The white dress, the trembling hands, the vows whispered like secrets. I'd meant every word. I'd stood by her when her father got sick, when her career hit a wall, when she said she didn't know who she was anymore. I'd given her everything. And what had she given me? A break. Space. Jared's hands on her hips. You're right, Loretta, I said, my voice low and steady. I did take vows. I took them seriously. Every day. Every night. I put her first even when it cost me sleep, when it cost me peace, when it cost me myself. But she broke those vows the moment she found comfort in someone else's arms. The moment she decided my loyalty was something she could take for granted. My voice caught for a fraction of a second, but I pressed on. So, no, I don't owe her an open door. I don't owe her a second chance to hurt me. And I sure as hell don't owe you an explanation for choosing to protect my own damn heart. The line went quiet. Just the hum of the city outside my window and the echo of my own words ringing in my ears. I could imagine them standing there, Brielle looking small and shaken, Loretta's lips pursed in anger. Good. Let them stew in it. Let them see the man I'd become. Look, I said after a moment, softer now but no less certain. I didn't ask her to leave. I didn't ask her to lie. But I'm not going to be the one who keeps pretending everything's okay just because it makes things easier for her. She wanted a new chapter? Fine. But she doesn't get to keep using my pages. I let the words settle, final and heavy. A truth I'd been holding inside for too long. Brielle let out a choked sob. Mason, I just wanted us to be happy, she whispered. Her voice was small, lost, the voice of a girl who'd always had a safety net, and now realized it was gone. We had something good. I messed up, I know. But can't we just start over? Can't we try? I felt something break inside me then. A sharp pain that flared and then dulled into a quiet resignation. You're right, I said, voice steady but soft. We did have something good. Once. But you broke it. And I can't pretend it didn't happen. I won't. Because every time I look at you, I'll see him. Every time I hear your voice, I'll hear the lies you told me. And I deserve better than that. I deserve a life without wondering when the next betrayal will come. Loretta muttered something under her breath, something like unbelievable, but I didn't respond. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd drawn the line, and it felt like the first honest breath I'd taken in months. I heard Brielle's voice one last time, small and trembling. I don't know how to let you go, she said, like a confession. I closed my eyes, my heart steady. You don't have to, I told her, because I already did. I ended the call and set the phone down. The room was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. I looked around at the boxes I'd packed, the couch I'd picked out, the framed photo of my late father on the bookshelf. Everything in this space was mine again. The lock on the door felt solid, secure. The barrier I'd needed between the man I'd been and the man I was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I'd won something. My peace. My dignity. My freedom. And I wasn't about to let them take that away. 10 days later, I was heading into the weekend with a semblance of calm when an email hit my inbox with the subject line, formal notice of claim. The sender? Brielle's lawyer. I let out a slow breath and clicked it open, bracing myself for the worst. The message was short and clinical, as though we'd never shared a life together, like I was just a name on a spreadsheet. Brielle was demanding $6,000 for emotional distress and displacement. She claimed I'd mishandled shared property, her sketchbooks, her jewelry, even a half-used bottle of her favorite perfume. She claimed I'd been vindictive, that I'd abandoned her without notice. I stared at the words, letting them sink in like water in a cracked foundation. For a minute, my hands shook. The nerve of her. After everything, after the photos, after Jared's hands on her hips and her mother's lectures on loyalty, she had the audacity to accuse me of wrongdoing. I closed my eyes, letting the anger wash over me before I picked up the phone. Grace. I'd hired her a week after Brielle left, a no-nonsense lawyer with a reputation for turning messy divorces into clean exits. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and businesslike. Mason, I was about to call you. I saw the email, she said, already one step ahead. I explained what I'd read, my voice tight. She listened without interruption, her silence a steady bomb against the rage that threatened to boil over. When I was done, she let out a small laugh, cold, like ice breaking in a glass. They're trying to rattle you, she said. Don't let them. I exhaled, my shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. What do we do? I asked. She chuckled again, this time with an edge of satisfaction. We respond, she said, with receipts. And respond she did. By the time Monday morning rolled around, Grace had drafted a letter so sharp it could have cut through steel. She attached the courier receipts, every box I'd sent, each one marked fragile, with a tracking number and a signature from Brielle's father, Carlton. She included photos of the boxes, neatly sealed and labeled, each one with its own inventory list. There was no room for doubt. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. Nothing was thrown away. She even included screenshots of Loretta's vacation album, the one where Brielle's smile lit up the screen while Jared's hand rested on her hip, just to remind them that I hadn't abandoned her, she'd abandoned me. Grace's letter ended with a simple, brutal line. Any further harassment will be met with a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress. I read the draft 3 times, each time feeling the knot in my chest loosen just a bit more. I imagined Brielle opening that email, the color draining from her face as she realized she wasn't the only one who could play the game. I imagined Loretta reading it too, her righteous indignation withering under the weight of cold, hard evidence. Part of me felt petty, but most of me felt relieved. This was my line in the sand. No more tears. No more apologies. Just the truth. That night, I poured myself a drink, a cheap whiskey I'd picked up at the corner store, and sat on the couch, staring at the city lights through the window. I let the amber liquid burn its way down my throat, a reminder that sometimes the hardest medicine was the one that tasted the worst. I thought about the emails, the boxes, the months of silence that had turned my heart into something harder than it had ever been. I wondered if Brielle thought she could just snap her fingers and make it all go away. Maybe she'd thought I'd crumble the way I used to, that I'd drop everything and beg her to come back. But that man was gone, buried under the weight of her lies. Grace called the next morning, her voice triumphant. She's rattled, she said. Her lawyer called me twice, trying to negotiate. I told him to save it for the courtroom. I'm not here to negotiate with people who think they can rewrite history. I let out a dry laugh. You're good at this, I said. She didn't laugh. Mason, I'm good at my job because I believe in facts, she replied. And the facts are on your side. Let them chase their own shadows. We'll stay right here. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I hadn't just survived this mess, I'd fought back. On my terms. I'd drawn my own boundaries and held them. I'd watched the people who thought they could control me stumble over their own arrogance. And it felt good, not vengeful, just clean. Like the first breath of air after a long storm. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my emails, looking at the reply Grace had sent, each attachment carefully labeled, each screenshot like a shield. I thought about Brielle's lawyer reading through them, line by line, realizing how meticulously I documented every detail of her departure. I thought about Loretta's self-righteous lectures, crumbling under the evidence of her own social media posts. It was like building a wall between me and their chaos, a wall made of receipts and truth. And behind that wall, I felt safe. I poured another glass of whiskey and raised it in a quiet toast to myself. To the man who didn't yell. To the man who didn't beg. To the man who learned that sometimes the strongest weapon is silence and a good lawyer. I thought about all the times I'd given Brielle the benefit of the doubt, the grace she'd never given me. I thought about the nights I'd sat awake wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed her. But the evidence didn't lie. The boxes didn't lie. The photos didn't lie. And that was the difference between me and her. I hadn't hidden anything. I hadn't run away from my choices. I'd faced them. And I'd survived. The apartment felt different that night. Warmer. Lighter. Like a place I could actually call home again. No more wondering if she'd come back. No more checking my phone for messages that never came. Just me, my couch, my whiskey, and the knowledge that I'd fought for myself and won. I turned on the TV and let the noise fill the space where her laughter used to echo. It wasn't the same, but it was enough. As I watched the credits roll on some mindless sitcom, I thought about the line Grace had written at the end of her letter. Any further harassment will be met with a countersuit. I let the words sink in. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't the man who'd wait for her to change her mind. I was the man who'd learned that sometimes love doesn't mean waiting. Sometimes it means letting go, no matter how much it hurts. I raised my glass one last time, the amber liquid catching the light like a promise. Here's to me, I whispered, to the man who stayed. And as I drank, I felt the strength settle in my bones, steady and unbreakable. I'd faced the storm. I'd weathered it. And I was still here. And that, I realized, was enough. More than enough. Word got around faster than I expected. It started with whispers at the office, an offhand comment at the coffee shop, a neighbor's knowing glance in the elevator. I should have known Brielle wouldn't keep her meltdown private. When people get caught, they flail. They grab at any attention that might paint them as the victim, rewrite the story in their favor. But screenshots don't lie, and I had plenty of those. Her meltdown came at me like a summer storm, loud, unpredictable, but easy enough to stand under if you'd prepared. And I had. Jared ghosted her. That was the word that trickled down from mutuals who couldn't help but share every detail. Turns out he couldn't handle her baggage, or maybe he'd realized she wasn't the perfect second chance he'd imagined. I didn't celebrate his absence, but I also didn't mourn it. Jared was her problem now. Let him handle the tears and the confusion and the constant need for reassurance. I was done with all of that. Brielle's meltdown was public, too. A friend of a friend messaged me screenshots of her posts, cryptic quotes about heartbreak, blurry photos of tears, captions that painted me as the cold-hearted man who boxed her out of his life. I read them with a kind of detached curiosity, like I was looking at a stranger's drama instead of my own. She called me unfeeling, manipulative, a man who'd shipped her life away with barcodes. The phrase made me laugh. I'd always believed in order and accountability. She'd called that controlling. Now it was a shield between us, a shield I was grateful for. Loretta tried to stir the pot among our old friends. She called them one by one, telling them how heartless I'd been, how I'd turned my back on her daughter when she needed me most. She left out the part about Jared. She left out the part where Brielle had chosen to leave, to find herself in someone else's arms. But receipts don't lie. And when people started asking the right questions, Loretta's voice started to tremble. Because the truth has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how many lies you pile on top. People started to reach out, some with concern, others with curiosity, a few with apologies. I listened to each one, measured my words carefully. I wasn't about to get drawn into a pity party or a debate about who was right or wrong. I'd said my piece. I'd given her space. The boxes were delivered, the receipts were in order, and the locks were changed. My conscience was clean. One evening, I got a text from a friend who'd known both of us since college. "Man, I'm sorry," it read. I saw what she posted, but I also saw the screenshots. Don't let her drag you down. You did what you had to do. I stared at the message, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. It wasn't about vindication. It was about being seen. About knowing someone else understood the line I'd drawn, the boundaries I'd enforced. I wrote back, "Thanks. I'm good. Just focusing on moving forward." And I meant it. I'd stopped checking her accounts by then. I didn't need to see the drama unfold in real time. I didn't need the reminder that she'd chosen the public eye over a private apology. Let her tell her story to whoever would listen. I had my own story to live, and it didn't include her anymore. One night, a mutual friend called me. His voice was tight, hesitant. "Mason, I hate to even bring this up, but she's saying you threw out her sketchbooks. That you took her grandmother's earrings and sold them. That you..." "I don't know, man. People are talking." I let out a breath, steady, calm. "Tell them to ask her parents," I said. "Tell them to ask for the courier receipts, the photos of every single item. Everything's documented. Everything's accounted for. The earrings are in box 8. The sketchbooks are wrapped in tissue paper, labeled, delivered, and signed for by her father. He was quiet on the other end. I figured, he said. Just thought you should know. I thanked him and ended the call. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the last piece of her drama slip off my shoulders like a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The city felt different after that. Cleaner, somehow. The same streets I'd walked with her felt wider, brighter. The air felt easier to breathe. I started going for evening runs, letting the rhythm of my footsteps pound out the last echoes of her voice in my head. I'd come home, sweaty and tired, and stand under the shower with the water beating down on me like rain. And each time, I felt lighter. I started to see people again, old friends, new faces. I found myself at a bar one Friday night, laughing at a story I'd heard 1,000 times before, but for the first time in ages, it felt new. I ordered a drink and toasted to the man I was becoming. The man who knew his worth, the man who'd learned that some people's apologies come too late. And that was okay. I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need her validation. I'd given myself enough closure to last a lifetime. One afternoon, I got a final email from Grace. No further contact from her lawyer, she wrote. No countersuit. No claim. Just silence. Congratulations, Mason. You're free. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. You're free. It felt like a benediction, like a door swinging open on a new life. That night, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, no whiskey, just something warm and comforting. I scrolled through the photos on my phone, sunsets, my nephew's birthday party, the view from my new office. No photos of her. No photos of us. Just moments that were mine. I realized then that the best revenge wasn't a fiery email or a countersuit or even a perfectly wrapped box. The best revenge was living my life with peace, with dignity, with a heart that no longer needed her to understand why she'd lost me. Let her unpack her mess. Let her tell her story to whoever would listen. My story was simple. I survived. I healed. I thrived. And now, every step I took was a step away from the chaos she'd left behind. Let them talk. Let them wonder. I had receipts. I had the truth. But most of all, I had myself. And that was worth more than any apology she could ever give. It's been quiet. Peaceful even. The apartment feels like mine now, every corner echoing with a kind of calm I hadn't realized I'd been craving. No more scented oils on the bookshelf. No more half-finished mugs of coffee abandoned in the sink. No more passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge reminding me to buy almond milk or empty the dishwasher. Just me, and the rhythm of my own breathing, my own routines. My gym shoes sit neatly by the door, a reminder of the runs that have become my new therapy. The way the pavement feels solid under my feet, each step a declaration that I'm moving forward one stride at a time. No more waiting for apologies that would never come. No more questions that would never be answered. Just sweat and breath and the steady beat of my own heart. And it feels good. It feels like freedom. I've started dating again. Nothing serious. Just light dinners, easy conversations, laughter that doesn't come with strings attached. No one's asking me to fix their broken pieces, and I'm not offering mine either. It's refreshing. The first date was a quiet dinner with a woman named Lydia. She's smart, funny, the kind of person who listens without waiting to speak. We talked about movies and books and the weird way city lights look on rainy nights. She didn't ask me about Brielle, and I didn't bring her up. Because this is my time now, my chance to step into a life that isn't defined by what I've lost, but by what I can build. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Brielle, about the way she used to hum while painting, or the way she'd curl her legs under her on the couch. I don't think about Jared or her mother's condescending tone. I think about the woman I married, the one who used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. I think about the promises we made and the way she walked away from them. And then I remind myself that the version of her I loved doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. And that's okay. Because the version of me that needed her validation doesn't exist anymore either. The other day, I walked past the bench at the park where she first told me she loved me. I paused for a moment, letting the memory flicker like an old film reel. Her laugh, the way the wind caught her hair, the soft tremble in her voice. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt grateful. Because loving her taught me how to love myself, how to stand up for my own worth, how to pack up a life that was breaking me and send it on its way, how to say goodbye. The best revenge, I've realized, isn't about rage or destruction. It's about removing yourself from the cycle that hurts you. It's about choosing peace over chaos, dignity over drama. It's about building a life so full and rich that the person who once broke your heart becomes a footnote, a lesson learned, a page turned. And that's what I've done. I've stepped out of her story and into my own. And every day, I get to decide how that story unfolds. Tonight, I'll set my alarm for an early run. I'll meet Lydia for coffee afterward, and maybe we'll laugh about something silly, a dog in a sweater, a kid with chocolate on his face. I'll come home, open the windows, and let the light pour in. I'll make dinner for one, and it'll be enough. More than enough. Because I've learned that I'm enough. With or without her. Always was. Always will be. It started as an ordinary evening, the kind where the hum of daily life blended into a quiet lull. I had just settled on the couch, my laptop open, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand while scrolling through emails with the other. My shoulders ached from another long workday, but at least I was home, in what I thought was my safe space. The notifications on my phone buzzed occasionally. Work messages, a couple of bank alerts, nothing unusual. But then, a message popped up that made my stomach tighten. "Dad, you need to see this." It was from my daughter, Claire. Something about the tone unsettled me. Claire wasn't the type to be dramatic over text. If she was sending me something with urgency, it meant something serious. My fingers hesitated over the screen before tapping on the attachment. A video? I pressed play. At first, the screen was dark and shaky, the muffled sound of voices filling the silence. Someone had filmed this secretly. Then, the image steadied, and my blood ran cold. There they were, my wife, Michelle, her brother Adrian, and her parents, Gregory and Diane, seated around my kitchen table. My home, the place I had built for my family. The same people who had smiled at me over dinner just last week, who had hugged me and thanked me for everything I did. "He's nothing but a worthless burden," Michelle scoffed, swirling a glass of red wine in her hand as if she were discussing a stranger, not her husband. "He thinks he's doing us a favor?" Adrian laughed. "After everything we've done for him, he owes us." "Paying the mortgage is the least he can do," Gregory grunted. The words slammed into me, knocking the breath from my lungs. I paused the video, my hands gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Did I hear that right? I pressed play again. There was no mistake. A worthless burden. He owes us. The least he can do. I replayed it once, then again, and again. Each time, the betrayal cut deeper, the words sinking like blades into my skin. I had spent 4 years covering their mortgage, funneling the payments through Titan Investments, my LLC, ensuring they never missed a deadline. They thought they were paying a bank, blissfully unaware that I was the one keeping their house from foreclosure. My money, my sacrifice. And this was what they thought of me? I had done it because I wanted to help, because I believed in family, because Michelle had cried to me years ago, telling me her parents would lose everything if they didn't get financial assistance. I had quietly arranged it all, without a second thought, believing it was the right thing to do. And yet, here they were, gathered around a table, mocking me, not grateful, not even indifferent, spiteful, disgusted, as if I were some fool who existed only to serve them. I set my phone down, inhaling sharply through my nose. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind, but one stood out above the rest. I was done. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront Michelle with some dramatic fight scene. No, that would be too easy. I would do something better. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Claire. "Thank you. Don't tell anyone you sent this, but things are about to change." Then, for the first time in years, I smiled. I sat in my home office, staring at the glowing numbers on my laptop screen. The room was dim, lit only by the soft hum of my desk lamp. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, hesitating for just a moment before I clicked on the financial records I had buried under layers of spreadsheets and business transactions. $285,400. That was how much I had paid toward their mortgage over the last 4 years. Nearly $300,000, quietly funneled through Titan Investments, my LLC, disguised as monthly bank payments so that Michelle's family wouldn't feel like they were living on my charity. $61,200. That was how much they had contributed. A mere 20%. I let out a slow, controlled breath, rubbing my temples as the weight of the numbers settled over me. For 4 years, I had been carrying 80% of their home's cost, sacrificing vacations, hobbies, and even simple luxuries for my wife's family, all while they sat in my home, drinking my wine, calling me a worthless burden. My jaw clenched, the memory of that video searing through my mind like a fresh wound. They hadn't just used me. They had laughed about it. I glanced at the framed wedding photo on my desk. Michelle in her ivory gown, her hand in mine, both of us smiling at a future I had once believed in. I turned the frame face down. The last piece of my delusion crumbled as I reached for my phone and scrolled to a familiar number. Marcus. He was more than just my financial advisor. He was also my lawyer and someone I trusted to handle things cleanly. I pressed dial, leaning back in my chair as the call connected. Steve, what's up? I need to talk about the purchase clause in the mortgage agreement, I said, my voice cool, controlled. There was a pause, then a knowing chuckle. Something tells me this isn't just about a casual financial review. You'd be right. Marcus clicked his tongue thoughtfully. All right. From what I remember, Titan Investments holds the mortgage, meaning if they ever default on a payment, I take full ownership, I finished for him. Exactly. The house becomes yours. They become month-to-month tenants. I exhaled slowly, feeling the pieces fall into place. When's their next payment due? 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks. For the first time in 4 years, I wouldn't be paying it. And if the payment doesn't go through, then Titan Investments will issue a default notice. They'll have 30 days before eviction proceedings start. I tapped my fingers against my desk, processing the gravity of my next move. I had spent years building their safety net. Now, I was about to pull it away. Proceed as planned, I said, my voice firm. Understood, Marcus replied. I'll start the paperwork. I hung up and set my phone down, staring at the dark screen. 2 weeks. That was all it would take. The very people who had mocked me, who had called me a burden, were about to learn what it really meant to owe someone everything. And this time, there would be no mercy. The invitation came just a few days later. Michelle walked into the living room with a bright, expectant smile, as if she hadn't just been caught conspiring against me days ago. She leaned against the couch, casually adjusting the hem of her sweater, her tone light. Honey, we should have dinner at my parents' house on Sunday. They want to talk to us about something important. I already knew what this was about. The mortgage. The money. The next phase of their manipulation. I could almost hear Gregory's exaggerated sigh, see Adrian's smug grin, feel Diane's fake warmth as she tried to convince me, once again, that I was part of the family while they slowly drained me dry. Michelle had no idea I had already decided to let their world collapse. I forced a neutral smile. Of course, I said, keeping my voice easy. Sunday sounds perfect. She beamed, mistaking my compliance for submission. They thought I was still their fool. But in just 8 days, they would learn otherwise. Sunday arrived. The house, their house, which I owned, looked the same as always when we pulled into the driveway. But everything felt different now. Before, I had seen this place as a symbol of generosity, a sacrifice for family. Now, it was a monument to my stupidity. Diane was at the door before we even knocked, her smile warm and welcoming. Fake. I could see it now. All of it had always been fake. Steve, sweetheart, she gushed, pulling me into a hug like I was her favorite son-in-law. Her perfume was overwhelming, and I had to stop myself from recoiling. Michelle walked in beside me, her fingers looping around mine as we moved into the dining room. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. Did she know? Did she know I had seen the video? Did she know that in exactly 1 week, their mortgage would default and I'd be kicking them out of their own home? I doubted it. If she did, she wouldn't be sitting beside me, resting her hand on my knee as if we were the perfect couple. Adrian and Gregory were already seated at the table, both exchanging a silent look before turning toward me. I knew that look. They were about to ask for money. Again. We went through the small talk first, the usual shallow pleasantries about work, the weather, Claire's recent college projects, but I could feel it coming. The way their smiles stretched just a little too tight. The way Gregory's hand drummed against the table. The way Michelle shifted beside me, nudging me just slightly, like a gentle push toward their trap. Then, finally, Michelle cleared her throat and looked at me with those eyes. The ones that used to convince me to do anything. "Babe, we wanted to talk about the mortgage," she said sweetly, like she was asking for something small. I remained silent. Let them talk. Gregory exhaled deeply, shaking his head, playing the part of a man burdened by life's unfairness. "We're struggling a little," he admitted, his voice weary. "The payments are it's getting harder to keep up." It took everything in me not to laugh. He was telling me about financial struggles? Me? The only reason he still had a roof over his head was because of me. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch. Adrian, ever the opportunist, leaned forward. "We were thinking, if you could just help out a little more. Maybe contribute an extra $2,500 a month?" There it was. More. After everything I had already given, after 4 years of supporting them in secret, they still wanted more. I let my gaze drift over them, Gregory, rubbing his temple like he was exhausted from the burden of my money. Diane, watching me expectantly, like she was sure I'd agree. Adrian, practically smirking, already counting the extra cash in his mind. And Michelle, my wife, the woman I had loved, had trusted, sitting beside me with zero guilt, fully expecting me to give in just like always. I set my glass down. "I'll think about it," I said smoothly. Michelle beamed as if she had already won. They all thought I was agreeing. They had no idea that in exactly 8 days, their world would collapse. I glanced at my watch, suppressing a smile. 8 days. The exact time before their mortgage defaulted. I had no intention of staying late that night. The moment we finished dinner, I was ready to leave. Every second spent in that house, my house, felt suffocating. The fake smiles, the forced laughter, the quiet expectation that I would hand over more money like a loyal servant. But then I excused myself to use the bathroom. And as I walked past Gregory's study, I heard my name. I froze. The door wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar, and from inside, voices murmured in low, conspiratorial tones. "Steve's been hiding money in some LLC called Titan Investments," Gregory said. My pulse kicked up a notch. They knew. Adrian snorted. "And you're just figuring that out?" I took a careful step closer, straining to listen. "He's sitting on way more than he lets on," Adrian continued. "He's been paying more into the mortgage than what he claims. But the idiot set it up under a business name. We can use that." My grip tightened into a fist. "If he doesn't help voluntarily," Michelle's voice joined in smoothly, "we can remind him about that time he borrowed from our savings to pay his mother's medical bills. He thought we never knew." Cold rage swept through me. That money had saved my mother's life. When she had fallen sick, I had done everything possible to get her treatment. I had pulled money from savings, maxed out credit cards, and drained accounts. I never asked Michelle's family for a single dime. I had only borrowed temporarily from our shared savings, intending to replace it, which I had, every penny of it. And yet, here they were, using it as blackmail. Adrian laughed. "And if that doesn't work, we can spread some concerns about his mental stability at work. Maybe hint that he's been misusing company funds." I stopped breathing. This wasn't just manipulation. This was a threat, a serious one. They were planning to ruin me. For a long, agonizing moment, I stayed there, unmoving, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, I smiled. They thought they had leverage over me. They had no idea how wrong they were. I turned away, my mind already working through every possible move I could make. By the time I returned to the dining room, Michelle was all smiles again, as if she hadn't just plotted to destroy me moments ago. "Have you thought about the mortgage, babe?" she asked, reaching for my hand across the table. I squeezed hers gently, meeting her gaze with calm amusement. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You'll have my answer in 8 days." Adrian smirked, Gregory leaned back like he had already won, and Diane's face lit up with relief. They thought I was saying yes. They thought they had me cornered. What they didn't know was that their house, the very place they sat, smug and entitled, was already mine. and in just over a week, they would have nothing left. The week passed too slowly for my liking. Every interaction with Michelle felt like playing chess against an opponent who had no idea she was already checkmated. She was too sweet, too accommodating, too eager to please. As if buttering me up in the days leading to their financial demise would somehow change my mind. Honey, do you want your favorite dinner tonight? You've been working so hard. Let me take care of you. It would have been convincing if I didn't know the truth, but I let her continue, nodding at the right moments, smiling as if I were none the wiser. She thought I was still their fool, and that was fine, because in just 2 days, their entire world would crumble. The morning of the deadline, I sat in my office, my laptop open to Titan Investments account. I checked the time, 8:59 a.m. The mortgage payment was due at 9 a.m. sharp. Michelle and her family had no clue that this was the first time in 4 years that I wouldn't be paying it for them. I leaned back in my chair, watching the seconds tick down. 9 a.m. The screen refreshed. Payment failed. A slow, satisfied breath escaped my lips. It had begun. I reached for my phone and dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "It's done," I said simply. He didn't need clarification. "I'll send out the default notice immediately," Marcus replied. "They have 30 days. After that, eviction proceedings begin." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. 30 days. That was all the time they had left before I took away everything they had mocked me over. I ended the call and leaned back, staring at my phone, waiting for the inevitable fallout. It didn't take long. 9:12 a.m. Michelle's name flashed across the screen. I took my time answering. "Hey, babe," I said casually. Her voice was frantic. "Something's wrong with the mortgage. I just checked the account. The payment bounced. I don't understand what's happening." I smiled. There it was. The first crack in her perfect little world. "That's odd," I said, feigning confusion. "Did you check with the lender?" "Yes. And they said something about the mortgage being tied to an LLC, Titan Investments? I thought we were paying a bank, Steve. What the hell is Titan Investments?" Now she was asking the real questions. I let the silence drag out, letting her panic build before I spoke again. "Titan Investments isn't a bank," I said smoothly. "It's an LLC. My LLC." Dead silence. I could almost hear the gears in her head grinding to a halt as she tried to process the words. "What?" she whispered, her voice hollow. "I've been paying your family's mortgage for the last 4 years," I said, keeping my tone even, controlled. "Every single payment, every dollar that kept your parents in that house? That was me." Her breath hitched. "You're lying." "Check your email," I replied. "I sent you the legal notice." I could hear the faint sound of her typing, the heavy silence stretching between us. Then, a gasp. She saw it. The default notice. The official paperwork from Titan Investments stating that their mortgage was now in default, and that unless they came up with the full amount owed, ownership would revert completely to the LLC. To me, her husband, the same man she had called a worthless burden, the same man her family had plotted against, the man they had laughed at, thinking he owed them. Now, they owed me. Everything. Her voice came back, shaking. "Steve, tell me this is some kind of joke?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling with a satisfied sigh. "No joke, babe," I said. "You have 30 days. And then, before she could say another word, I hung up. The fallout was immediate. The moment I hung up on Michelle, my phone started ringing again. Over and over, her name flashing across the screen in frantic desperation. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, listening to the silence of my home, letting the weight of what I had done settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the fool. I let her calls go to voicemail. Less than an hour later, I got my next expected call. Gregory. I stared at his name for a moment before answering. "Steve," he barked, his usual arrogance tinged with an edge of panic. "What the hell is this notice we got from Titan Investments?" I leaned back, taking my time to respond. "It's exactly what it says." "What do you mean? This is our house. We've been making payments." "No," I corrected, my voice calm, measured. "I've been making the payments. And now, I'm done." Silence. For a moment, I thought he had hung up, but then his voice returned, lower, colder. You can't do this, Steve. I let out a breath, amused. I already did. The sudden shift in his tone wasn't unexpected. Gregory had always been a manipulator, the kind of man who played the benevolent father figure when it suited him, but turned into something uglier when he lost control. You ungrateful bastard, he snarled. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me? I had bought their house from foreclosure. I had kept them afloat for years, and they had mocked me for it. You have 30 days, Gregory, I said, completely unfazed by his fury. Make the payment, or the house is mine. You son of a... I hung up before he could finish. The panic sets in. The next few days were pure entertainment. Michelle didn't come home that night. Instead, she stayed at her parents' house, trying to calm the storm. I could only imagine what was happening behind those doors. Gregory barking orders, Diane on the verge of tears, Adrian trying to find an angle to weasel his way out of this mess. I didn't care. By the third day, I finally received the expected text from Michelle. Michelle, we need to talk. I ignored it. A second text followed. Michelle, Steve, please. We can fix this. There was nothing to fix. Gregory tries to fight back. On day 4, Gregory's desperation turned into aggression. I walked into my office that morning, my coffee steaming in my hand, only to find a new email sitting in my inbox, one with a very familiar sender. Gregory. The subject line was blunt. Reverse the notice immediately. I clicked it open. Steve, you have made a huge mistake. If you think you can just take our home, you are gravely mistaken. I have already contacted a lawyer, and we will be fighting this with everything we have. If you want to avoid a legal battle, I suggest we have a conversation immediately. Gregory. I chuckled. He had no case. I forwarded the email to Marcus, my lawyer, with a simple message. Prepare for the empty threats. Let's proceed. Within 2 hours, Marcus replied. He has no legal standing. The mortgage terms are airtight. Let them scream all they want. That was all I needed. Gregory could threaten, but it didn't matter. Adrian tries to ruin me. As expected, Adrian took a different approach. By day 6, I got a call from an old friend at work. Hey man, he said hesitantly, you should know someone's been making calls about you, asking about your financials. I smirked. Of course. Let me guess, I said, already knowing the answer. Adrian? There was a pause before my friend sighed. Yeah, he was fishing for dirt. Something about you misusing company funds? I laughed. I had been expecting this. Adrian had always tried to act smarter than he was. What he didn't realize was that I had already warned HR weeks ago. The moment I found out about their plan to sabotage me, I had made sure the truth was well documented. I wasn't the fool they thought I was. Let him keep trying, I said. He's just wasting his time. Reality hits. By the end of the week, the reality had sunk in. Their legal threats were useless. Adrian's attempts to sabotage me had failed. They had no money to cover the mortgage payment. For the first time, they understood what it meant to be powerless. And I was enjoying every second of it. I finally responded to Michelle's desperate texts with just one message. You have 24 days left. Make it count. The moment I hit send, I smiled to myself. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. The fallout was beautiful to watch. I had expected rage. I had anticipated desperation. But I hadn't expected just how low they would sink in their attempts to claw their way out of their mess. And of course, Adrian was the first to take a swing. The smear campaign begins. By the time I arrived at work on Monday morning, my assistant Julia was already waiting at my office door, her face tight with concern. Hey, there's something weird going on, she said as I walked in. I set down my coffee. Weird how? She hesitated. I overheard some guys in the break room talking. Someone's been making calls, asking about you, trying to stir up rumors. It sounded serious. I wasn't surprised. I knew exactly who was behind it. Adrian. He had tried blackmail, and when that didn't work, he had gone for character assassination. Predictable. Pathetic. I opened my laptop and pulled up my email, already expecting the worst. Sure enough, There was a message waiting from HR, flagged as urgent. Steve, we've received some anonymous concerns regarding financial misconduct on your part. This includes alleged misuse of company funds and ethical violations. While we do not act on baseless claims, we would appreciate a meeting to clarify these matters. Let us know your availability. Regards, HR. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. They really thought they could ruin me. I grabbed my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. This about the Adrian problem? You already heard? Oh yeah, he chuckled. Your boy's been working overtime, calling anyone who'll listen. Too bad for him. No one's buying it. I smirked. Good. But let's make sure he doesn't get any further. Already on it. I ended the call, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. This was going to backfire spectacularly. The HR meeting. By the time I walked into HR that afternoon, I was fully prepared. Sarah, the head of HR, greeted me with a polite but cautious smile. Steve, I'm sure you're aware of why we called this meeting. I nodded. I am. Let's get right to it. She opened a file, scanning the complaints. It seems someone has accused you of mishandling company funds. I feigned mild confusion. That's interesting. Do they have any actual proof, or is this just hearsay? Sarah's lips twitched. It's vague. No evidence has been presented. It's mostly speculation. Exactly as I thought. I folded my hands over my knee. You know I've been working here for nearly a decade, right? Have I ever given you reason to believe I'd do something unethical? She sighed. No, you haven't. Which is why this all seems suspicious. I leaned forward slightly. Then let's make this easy. I give you full permission to audit anything you need. My accounts. My transactions. Hell, I'll even let you call my bank. Sarah blinked, clearly surprised. That won't be necessary. I trust you. I smiled. Good. Now, would you like to know who started this little rumor? She hesitated before nodding. I pulled out my phone, opened my call log, and slid it across the table. Multiple calls from one person, Adrian. Sarah's expression darkened. Your wife's brother? That's the one. He's got a personal grudge, and this is his sad little attempt to settle it. She sighed, rubbing her temple. I hate office drama. I laughed. Tell me about it. She tapped her pen against the desk before giving me a decisive nod. Consider this handled, Steve. We won't entertain baseless accusations any further. I stood, shaking her hand. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. As I left the office, I sent a quick text to Marcus. They dropped it. Adrian lost. Marcus, of course he did. Now, let's watch him spiral. And spiral he did. Adrian's downfall. By the time I got home that night, Adrian had already realized his plan had failed. My phone rang just as I stepped inside. I checked the caller ID. Adrian. I smirked and answered. Adrian, to what do I owe this pleasure? His voice was livid. You think you're so clever, don't you? I chuckled. No, I don't think. I know. You ruined my life. You smug bastard, he spat. HR called my office. They want to review my transactions because of you. I leaned against the counter, enjoying this far too much. Oh, that? Yeah. I may have mentioned a few things about your shady business dealings. He went silent, because he knew exactly what I meant. Adrian wasn't just a liar. He was a fraudster. And the second HR got a whiff of his questionable financial history, they had launched a full investigation into him. He had tried to ruin me, but all he had done was expose himself. You son of a... I hung up before he could finish. The final blow. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch, feeling more at peace than I had in years. Adrian was finished. Gregory's legal threats had failed. Michelle? She hadn't come home in 2 days, probably drowning in her family's mess. I checked my phone one last time before bed. A single text from Michelle. Michelle, we need to talk. Please. I took a sip of my drink and typed a reply. Me? We will. But not in the way you think. Then I set the phone down, knowing exactly what came next. The eviction notice. The morning of the 30-day deadline was crisp and clear, the kind of day that should have felt normal. But for Michelle's family, It would be anything but. I sat at my kitchen table, in my home, sipping a steaming cup of coffee, knowing that at that very moment, Gregory, Diane, Adrian, and Michelle were waking up to reality. Today, they were no longer homeowners. Their delusion had officially expired. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There it was, the official notice from Titan Investments, confirming that their grace period had ended. I clicked forward and sent it directly to Gregory, Michelle, and Adrian, adding just a simple message beneath it. Consider this your final notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Then, I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. 7:42 a.m., Michelle called. I ignored it. 7:44 a.m., Adrian called. Ignored. 7:46 a.m., Gregory called. Ignored. By 7:50 a.m., my phone was blowing up with texts. Michelle, what is this? You're really doing this? Adrian, you think you won? You have no idea what you're starting. Gregory, you entitled little brat. You think you can take what's mine? I read each message with a smirk. Sipping my coffee like this was just another peaceful morning. And then, at 8:02 a.m., there was a loud, furious banging at my front door. They came in person. Perfect. The showdown. I took my time walking to the door, opening it to reveal exactly what I expected. Gregory's face was red with rage. Adrian looked on the verge of losing control, and Michelle stood between them, her eyes wide with desperation. Diane wasn't there. Smart woman. She probably stayed behind, already resigning herself to their fate. Steve, Michelle started, stepping forward. We need to talk. Please. I crossed my arms. Talk? I gave you 30 days to talk. You ignored every warning. Gregory let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You ungrateful little bastard. We took you in. We made you family. And this is how you repay us? I tilted my head, feigning confusion. You made me family? Or you made me your personal bank? His mouth snapped shut. You were living in a house that I was paying for, I continued. And yet, behind my back, you mocked me. You called me a burden, a fool, all while sitting under a roof that my money kept over your heads. Michelle flinched, but Gregory wasn't done. You think you can just take our home from us? He spat. We've been making those payments for years. I let out a sharp laugh. Have you, though? Because according to the records, I've covered 80% of those payments. And now, I own it. Legally. Gregory's fists clenched, and for a second, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then Adrian stepped in, his usual smug arrogance replaced with something far more dangerous. You better be careful, Steve, he said smoothly. People don't just get away with things like this. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to make sure they understood exactly how over this game was. I didn't get away with anything, Adrian. I played fair. You didn't. And now you're losing. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. You have 29 days left, I added, turning to Gregory. Pack your things. I stepped back inside and shut the door in their faces. For the first time in years, I felt free. Michelle's plea. That night, I wasn't surprised when Michelle finally came home. She walked into the house quietly, no dramatics, no slamming doors, just the soft sound of her heels clicking against the floor as she stepped into the living room. I glanced up from my laptop, watching as she hesitated before speaking. Steve, she said carefully, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. Can we just talk? I gestured for her to sit. Go ahead. She bit her lip, exhaling shakily. You don't have to do this. I arched a brow. Do what, exactly? Her eyes searched mine, desperate. This whole revenge thing. I know you're hurt. I know what you heard. You mean the video? I cut in. The one where you and your family insulted me in my own home? That one. She winced. It wasn't like that. I gave her a pointed look. Michelle. She sighed, dropping her gaze to her lap. Okay, it was bad. I won't make excuses. But you have to understand, it was just talk. We didn't mean it. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You didn't mean it? So when you called me a worthless burden, that was just casual conversation? She swallowed hard. I was angry. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. Then I said the words that finally made her break. You were angry, so you called me worthless. I was angry, so I took your house. Her breath hitched. Steve. I held up a hand. No, Michelle. I spent years sacrificing for your family. I gave you everything, and it was never enough. And now, you're finally going to understand what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from under you. Tears welled in her eyes. So that's it, she whispered. You're just throwing away our marriage? I looked at her for a long moment before answering. No, Michelle. You threw it away the moment you betrayed me. Silence. Then, with a slow nod, she stood up, wiped her tears, and walked upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the closet door open, the rustle of clothes being pulled from hangers. She was packing. Good. Because in 29 days, she wouldn't have a home to return to. And that, finally, would be justice. The next morning, the house felt different. It wasn't just the tension. It was the understanding that everything had changed. That every conversation, every fake smile, every whispered scheme had led to this moment. Michelle had barely spoken since last night. She came downstairs, suitcase in hand. Her eyes red from what I assumed were tears she now realized were useless. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee when she hesitated by the doorway. I'll be staying with my parents, she said quietly. I took a slow sip before responding. Good choice. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I could tell she wanted me to say more, to give her some kind of olive branch, to change my mind, to offer her a way out of the mess she helped create. I wasn't going to. She had made her bed. Now she could lie in it. The house feels different now. After she left, I walked through the house. The house that had once been ours, that had once been full of memories. Now it was just mine. For years, I had convinced myself that I was doing the right thing by supporting Michelle's family. That paying their mortgage, covering their expenses, and sacrificing my own financial stability was just what a good husband did. But now I saw it for what it really was. A scam. I had been nothing more than a walking paycheck to them, someone they could mock behind my back while I kept them from drowning in their own irresponsibility. Not anymore. I had finally cut them off, and it felt damn good. The aftermath begins. By the end of the week, the news had spread. I didn't have to go looking for updates. They came to me. Michelle was still in denial, but Gregory and Adrian were in full-blown panic mode. My phone buzzed with a text from a mutual acquaintance. Tom, bro, I ran into Adrian today. He's losing it. Says you're ruining his whole life. I smirked, typing back. Me? Did he say how? Tom. Something about their credit tanking and how they're completely broke without your help. He was ranting about lawsuits, but let's be real, the guy has no case. I let out a chuckle. Of course they were broke. I had propped them up for so long, they had never bothered to actually take care of themselves. Now, without me, they were exactly what they accused me of being, burdens. Adrian's last pathetic attempt. On Friday night, I got a surprise visitor. The doorbell rang at nearly midnight, and when I checked the security camera, I wasn't surprised to see Adrian standing there, looking like a man on the edge. For a second, I considered ignoring him, but then I decided, why not have a little fun? I opened the door, leaning against the frame. Adrian. His jaw was tight, his eyes wild with frustration. You think this is over? I took a slow breath, pretending to consider his words. No, I think it's just beginning. His hands fisted at his sides. You don't have to do this. Do what, Adrian? I asked, tilting my head. Hold you accountable? Let you feel the consequences of your own actions? Funny, I don't remember you having this energy when you were calling me a worthless burden. His nostrils flared. We were joking. No, you weren't. Silence. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. You should leave, I said, before you embarrass yourself any further. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, before finally muttering, this isn't over. Then he turned and walked off into the night. And just like that, I knew. I had one. The reality of their new life. 3 weeks later, they moved out. I didn't watch it happen. I didn't need to. But I heard from Claire, our daughter, who had driven by out of curiosity. Dad, she said, laughing over the phone. You should see it. They look miserable. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Where are they moving? Some tiny rental across town. You'd think they were moving into a shack with the way they were acting. I nodded, satisfied. They had no idea how lucky they were. I could have let them lose everything, but I hadn't. I had just taken back what was rightfully mine. And now, they were finally forced to live within their means. Michelle's last goodbye. The night before they left, I got one final message from Michelle. It was a voicemail. I almost didn't listen to it, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. Her voice was shaky, exhausted, and, finally, defeated. Steve, I don't know what to say. I guess I just never thought you'd actually go through with this. I thought you still loved me. There was a long pause, a deep sigh. I don't know what happens now. I guess we're just done. I stared at my phone for a long moment after the message ended. Then, I hit delete. Yes, Michelle, we're done. For the first time in years, I was finally free. The day they moved out, I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly, at least. I didn't throw a party. I didn't gloat. I didn't stand outside their house, the house that was now mine, and watch them load up their overstuffed boxes into borrowed trucks. I didn't need to, because the victory wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about knowing that, for the first time in years, I had chosen myself. A fresh start. The silence in my house was refreshing. No more manipulative dinner invitations. No more phone calls about money. No more expectations that I would be the one to fix their problems. Just peace. I sat in my living room that night, looking around at the space that had once been theirs, too. Now, it was mine alone. And for the first time in a long time, I realized how much I had given up just to keep the people who never valued me. Not anymore. I picked up my phone and made the final decision that would close this chapter for good. I dialed Marcus. He picked up on the first ring. Tell me this is the call I think it is. I smirked. Put the house on the market. Selling the past. I could have kept it. I could have kept their house, rented it out, turned it into another financial asset under Titan Investments. But I didn't want it. I didn't want their ghosts haunting the walls. So I put it up for sale. And within 2 months, the offers started rolling in. Marcus sent me an email. Final offer, $985,000. Do you want to accept? I sat back, letting that number sink in. I had spent 4 years paying their mortgage, funneling nearly $300,000 into it, only to be repaid with betrayal, insults, and threats. Now, I was about to make nearly $1 million off the house they thought they owned. Poetic justice. I typed back one word. Accept. The final closure. The sale closed 2 weeks later. Michelle's family had no idea. As far as they knew, the house was still sitting empty, waiting for its next tenant. They thought they still had time to somehow win it back, but they didn't, because it was already gone. And so were they. Michelle's final plea. One evening, long after the house had been sold, I received a text from Michelle. Michelle, can we meet? Just once? I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Me? What's the point? She responded almost instantly. Michelle, I just need to talk to you. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I needed closure. But because I wanted to see what excuse she had left. The coffee shop meeting. She chose a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town. I arrived early, taking a seat by the window. When she walked in, she looked different. Not the confident, entitled woman who had once laughed about how I was nothing more than a burden. She looked tired, defeated. She slid into the chair across from me, folding her hands together, her engagement ring noticeably absent. I let the silence stretch between us. She was the one who wanted this meeting. She could be the one to start. Finally, she sighed. I don't even know what to say to you. I took a sip of my coffee. Then why are we here? Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, searching for something. Maybe the man who used to bend over backward for her. That man was gone. I miss you, Steve, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't react. I let the words settle, waiting for the catch. Because there was always a catch. Sure enough, she hesitated before adding, I don't understand how you could do this to me. To us. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. Do this to you? I repeated. Michelle, I did nothing to you. You did this to yourself. Her jaw tightened. I was angry, okay? I said things I didn't mean. I nodded. And I made choices I absolutely meant. She inhaled sharply, looking down at her hands. So that's it? She asked finally. We're really over? I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. We were over the moment I heard that video. Her face crumbled for just a second, just long enough for me to see regret, maybe even real guilt. But it didn't matter anymore. I stood up, tossing some cash onto the table for my coffee. Goodbye, Michelle. Then I walked away. I didn't turn back. I didn't hesitate, because for the first time in years, I was completely free. A new beginning. Selling the house wasn't just about the money. It was about starting fresh. With the sale, I took a portion of the profits and did something unexpected. I set up a foundation for victims of financial abuse, people who, like me, had been manipulated and drained by those they trusted the most. I named it the Phoenix Fund, because that's exactly what I was. A phoenix, burned, but reborn, rising from the ashes of what they thought was my destruction. Now, I was stronger than ever, and as I sat on the beach during my first vacation in years, watching the sun dip below the waves, I let out a deep, satisfied breath. I had no regrets, no bitterness, just peace. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.